My name is Joe Woodham. I'm from Torii Consulting. Welcome to our blog series on all things design. Today I'm joined by ANZ's Initiative Lead and Director of ANZ Horizon, Michelle Spencer. Michelle brings a wealth of knowledge in design leadership with an extensive experience that spans startups, corporate and government across Australia and Europe. Michelle is one of those rare design leaders that is great both on the tools and as a design leader. Thanks for joining me today, Michelle.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me. Nice to catch up.
Yeah, no, you too. It's been a while since we've last spoken. So just to jump into it straight away, you've had a really impressive career as a design leader across both Telstra for quite a while and now ANZ. Can you give us a bit of a career journey snapshot?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, well, look, I guess like so many, there's no straight line involved with my career journey. It's very jagged, which will relate to a lot of people, I think, listening to this. So, if I go back to the beginning, my parents were high school dropouts and immigrants as well. So they just wanted me to go further than what they did, which was, I think they bowed out at the equivalent of year 9 or year 10. I understood the value of money quite early. As growing up in a family of 6, we had no money. So having lived on the poverty line for a little while and in a tent, I started working as soon as I was legally allowed to do so that I could start supporting myself. And I think this is where those values really start to get ingrained into what I carry through to today. So I went through high school, nearly failed. I moved, but I did complete it just. Moved overseas for a while to get some life experience and really matured while I was away for a number of years. And I decided in that period that although I was working, I wanted to come back and study, and I wanted to do that in Australia as well. So I came back to study IT and education at the same time alongside working. So my work history started in retail, then in education as an IT teacher. I progressed to software development by switching industries. And then I started specialising in this thing called usability while I was working in software development. And that turned into design and then into creative leadership and then the corporate world. So as you mentioned, I've worked in startups and some large enterprise as well. So I feel I've seen some of the ups and downs of both worlds, which keeps things interesting, I think.
Yeah, man, thanks for sharing. That's a really, really cool background. I bet your parents are very excited to where you are now. Do they understand exactly what you do? Because I know from my parents still don't understand what I fully do. So.
No, I think our parents would be in the same camp. I think many parents would. My parents still think I created the internet. My mother-in-law thinks I fix printers all day long. So, no, look, they do make an attempt to understand what's going on, and they are fairly technically savvy, I would say, my parents. But there's a limit there as well. But they're very street smart, so they get some of the basics. But beyond that, they're just happy that we've been able to go beyond where they were able to, particularly on the education side of things. So,
now going from development into design, it's an interesting skill set. How did you find making that jump from being a coder into a designer? It's a very creative step sideways, I suppose.
It is. And I think given the educational upbringing that I had and the courses that I was involved with, I'm going back to sort of mid-2000s here. And at the time, there was a bit of a diversity in terms of what IT meant at the time. So I managed to be able to dip my toe in the water with aesthetics of design. So for example, visual design or graphic design as it was known then, also with regards to networking, coding, and I'm going back to the C++ days for those of the audience listening that are coders, and HTML, but also some of the other aspects around, well, how do you construct this stuff? How do you manage data? How do you manage information? How do you know what people want, etc.? And this is where that sort of information architecture and information systems aspect really comes into it. So I feel really fortunate that I was able to experience a few different aspects of IT as we know it, And then, of course, the education part of it. And I knew all along that coding is part of being in IT. Well, it was back then. And what it's helped me do is it's helped me understand where other technologists are coming from. So even though they might not be from the same ilk as myself in design, I have an appreciation of what engineers and developers need. I have an appreciation of what a business analyst does because I've done that role myself before. And I think even though, you know, I haven't specialized in those other areas, I have worked with those disciplines, and I've also done some of those disciplines myself. And I think it really gives a broader appreciation of what other people's needs are, but then staying true to yourself and the things that, you know, specifically drive me as a person. And that's more working with people to create solutions to a particular challenge or problem. And this is, I think, where some of those softer skills come in around communication and, you know, being able to work with people and, you know, do the dot to dot, stringing things together and seeing a bigger picture and then creating a plan on what do we need to do and how do we do it and when are we doing it by. I think those softer skills really come into play. So that's the bit that I have gravitated towards or been pushed towards, who knows. And I really enjoy it. So, but yeah, I do really enjoy working in that technical space, but also conscious of being that bridge between both what we call a technologist camp and a business camp, because sometimes, often actually, those two areas within an organization, it's like speaking two different languages. So being a translator definitely has its benefits. Yeah.
Yeah, I could only imagine, like, the conversations between a designer who wants to make something pretty and a developer who just wants to make something functional, and being able to communicate that is, I guess, a very important trait.
And it's actually really interesting because, you know, some developers really want to have the best customer outcome there is and want to tinker in design, you know, and this is why, even though you know, sometimes you have engineers or developers that really try their best at getting the UI right, it might not be perfect, but I will never ever criticize that at all, because I think someone's trying. And even though it might be off the mark at times because they don't specialize in it either, the fact that they've actually tried and considered what the user might be going through when they're using the interface, for me, is phenomenal. And likewise with designers, for example, that attempt to code or more technical aspects of the design role, I will never criticize that either, because I think it's that person's attempt at trying to develop and trying to grow in their own right, but also having an appreciation for what might make life easier for the end user or the person needing to, I guess, build via code that particular experience and bring it to life. And then you've got the whole business side of things, which is not design or development, and how do they interpret what's being done and how can they best support what needs to be done. So there's a conduit with regards to translation there as well. So, you know, the world's the oyster, as they say on that one.
Do you think over the last couple of years, the progression of how, let's say, a product team works together has really like advanced how the communication between development and designers is, I guess, being done?
I think in some aspects, yeah, I think in some aspects, absolutely, particularly as we see more and more of this Spotify way of working model being rolled out globally. And I know particularly in Australia, it's a massive thing, and it has been for a couple of years. And I think where we have these cross-functional teams working closer and closer together to deliver a goal and be on a mission, it helps everyone understand where each other is coming from. And in that, you need to be able to communicate. And if you are working in an agile manner, you've got those things like rituals, you've got the stand-ups, you've got the retrospectives, etc. You can't get around that. There's no sort of broader team to try and hide behind, or you know, intentionally or unintentionally. It's you that is there as the designer in that cross-functional team that needs to help other people within your team or your squad realize what needs to be done from a design perspective or an engineering perspective or a content perspective, whatever it might be, and you need to execute on that. So it's you and only you within a team that owns your piece of the pie, and that involves greater communication, whether it's written, whether it's through visuals, whether it's through presentations, by hook or by crook. You need to increase your communication working in those types of environments. Absolutely.
Agreed. And I think organisations that get that right seem to get ahead. Like they've got happier teams, they're developing better products, and they're doing it quicker.
Yeah, and I think the key one there that you mentioned is being able to do it quicker as well. It's, you know, some people refer to it as speed to market or speed to value. But typically, particularly in large organisations, it can take forever to get anything done. You know, a release cycle can easily blow out to 9 months, releasing one release every 9 or 12 months, which is, you know, in the startup world, and smaller organizations, that's just crazy. It's, you know, you're doing multiple releases per day, not one per 9 months. So, you know, being able to work and increase the velocity in those smaller, agile and more nimble groups is critical to be able to give customers that what they want a lot quicker, because if you can't get it to them, your competitor will. So it's critical.
Probably why the rise of the startup has been so prominent over the last couple of years. They can just move so much quicker and get what a customer needs to market faster than, unfortunately, large corporates.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it presents a real challenge for larger organisations when they are trying to and striving to be more nimble and quicker and more agile in the way they work. They do ask themselves, you know, if we're going to market with new initiatives and new product offerings, do we leverage existing capability and existing platforms and technology, which, you know, of which there can be a lot of positives, but there can also be a lot of drawbacks and a lot of technical and design debt, etc. Or do we use new capability, new platforms, which presents a whole other raft of challenges and opportunities as well. So it's very interesting to see whether it's a bit like a snake shedding its skin, right? Do you choose to do that and you go down this other path, or do you stick with what you've got, but it's going to take you longer to be able to execute?
Yeah. So like in your roles over the last couple of years, what are the main types of people you generally hire for? And in your current role at ANZ, what do you generally hire for?
It's a great question. And ANZ itself being such a large organisation, there's about 40,000 employees, I think. So there's many types of roles that ANZ itself as a company would employ or does employ, you know, from branch staff to contact centre staff to head office staff, if you like, across an array of disciplines. But in my space specifically, it's all around creative business, doing creative business. So specifically designers of the UX and visual design and research kind, to content and production, to engineering, and working in parallel with some of the other functions to reach our goals in that sort of squad-like mindset. And that includes often marketing people, people from product, risk, legal, etc. And with regards to employment type, there's a mixture of perms, there's consultants, contracts, all sorts of durations in terms of tenure as well. So you've definitely got people that have been around for a long, long time, and you've got people that have been around for much shorter than that.
Okay. I guess having such a wide range of different types of people that you generally look for, is there any underlying attributes in someone when you are hiring that you look for? And has that changed in the last year since we've been working fully remote? Like, has anything changed with your hiring strategy?
So what I look for personally is I look for the what, and I also look for the how. So not only is it about what they do, but it's also how they do it. So for example, it's no good if a technically brilliant person presents, but they can't work with others. That just does not help anyone. And I also don't want everyone to be the same. So respecting varying personalities and viewpoints is really critical, because it allows for diverse groups of thinkers, which is part of the creative process in finding solutions. So And at the end of the day, with remote working, I couldn't care where the person's based. You could be based on Mars for all I care, as long as you're doing the work. Because I do know other people from my career, you know, you could be based in the office, myself included in this. You can be based there full time and be really unproductive, just because of all the distractions and everything else going on. So I really don't subscribe to this notion of having to be in an office or having to work from home or having to work from a library to be effective. I think it's about empowering the people to be able to determine where they work most effectively, and then to be able to hold them to account on that. And if it's not going according to plan, then that might be okay too, because stuff changes. We're all human. You know, what worked 3 months ago doesn't necessarily work today. So if that needs to change, being able to have the dialogue with each other to say, hey, I know we said this, but now this needs to happen. So can we give this a go? And then there's also the amount of crossover that you need with a team or with your direct reports, etc. Does that mean that you spend one day in the office or one day in a park as a group, or one day at someone's house? What does that even look like? And I think it's really important to be able to have those discussions with individuals and team members to work out what great looks like from a team perspective. And therefore that feeds into the culture of the team and everyone's overall fulfillment, I think, and engagement.
Have you had any challenges with that and just getting the right frequency of communication over the last year? I think it's been well, for me personally, it's been challenging just to get that understanding of what's working and what doesn't work around how much time we spend as a team. And when we come into the office now, we don't need to be in the office all the time. So how have you managed that?
Yeah, absolutely. There are absolutely challenges with that. I think first and foremost for me, you know, it's understanding your own limits. And when you don't understand them up front, because, you know, you're dealing with a pandemic. And if we cast our minds back to 12 months ago, when we didn't really know what was going on, we didn't know what this whole COVID thing was and if it was going to kill the entire population. Like, we just didn't know, right? So there was the fear of the unknown, but understanding as time progresses what your own limits are is critical, so that you can say, you know what, I can do this, but I can't do this, or for this bit, I need to be here or I need to be there. And opening the communication lines up with colleagues as well, whether they're, you know, direct reports in your team or peers or, you know, your line manager, whoever they are, opening the lines of communication to say, look, you know, this is what's going on for me. How can we best support this? Being able to have a conversation like that, which can be a bit daunting at times because not everyone, you know, feels super comfortable about tapping into that sort of personal territory as well. And you know, it also added complexity around, you know, introverts and extroverts and where are you on the scale. And you know, we found that many of the introverts have really struggled being away from an office and interacting with people in the flesh, if you like, in real life. But many of the introverts have loved it. They've loved working from home. But it doesn't mean that people don't get lonely or that they want to give up the office altogether. I think there's a healthy balance of that, and just understanding where everyone's at, what they're going through, and being able to almost create an individual plan for people where needed, and also being mindful of what the business would like, because at the end of the day, we're employed by a business and they have a voice too, or the business has a voice. But making that work for an individual to the best of our ability is really critical. And just, you know, holding those lines of communication open. And for some people, as I said, they wear their heart on their sleeve and, you know, very, very early on how they're feeling about everything. And for other people, you know, it can take days, weeks, months, even a year on. Sometimes I'm not totally sure where everyone's at, but we have dialogue, and I have enough trust in my team members and also my peers and other colleagues that, you know, if they are struggling or they really need to talk, they do know that they can reach out to me, and they do from time to time. So, you know, I like keeping the dialogue open. I try not to push too much, but it is important that people know that you are here and they can talk when they need to. So it's been important. And it's been important for me too, like my own situation, 3 children at home, you know, work full time. It's, you know, especially last year was trying to do the homeschooling. It was just it was a mess. It was a mess. The wheels fell off. I saw them falling off. one by one, all four wheels fell off. And you know what? Part of it is around acknowledging that, hey, I'm seeing that wheel come unstuck. And by the way, the second wheel's coming off too. Oh, there goes number 3. There goes number 4. Let's just pick those wheels up, stick them back on, and try our best. And you know what? They may or may not fall off again, but they're probably falling off for other people too. So empathy is high. And for me, being able to have that discussion, say, with my line manager has been really important for him to be able to get a level of empathy and for me to be able to share that.
My empathy is very high for anyone with more than one. I have one daughter, and wow, at times it was challenging for me. So for you to have 3 and have to homeschool and all that sort of, my daughter's only 18 months. So having 3 that you're homeschooling, yeah, I bet you had your work cut out for you, plus a full-time job.
Luckily, I'm a qualified teacher. Not that it really helped, but anyway, and I do think, you know, having younger children than mine as well can be a challenge, right? Because they don't really understand that, you know, you need to be on a phone call for half an hour. They don't get that. But likewise, there's been a lot of people who don't have children, but they've got animals or they've got grandparents, or, you know, I know, you know, my mother-in-law, for example, she's isolated. She's an hour away from us and she's living by herself. You know, so there's other types of commitments that people can have, which can be equally or more challenging than having children at home sometimes. But yes, it definitely is a space that really nudge the boundaries in terms of, you know, an individual strengths. Yeah, absolutely. No doubt about it. Don't want to go back there.
Definitely. So working at ANZ, what do you think set ANZ apart from other places you've worked or other places that you know of as a great place to work? Like what are the key things that you've enjoyed or you think your team get from working at ANZ?
Yeah, look, interesting question. And I think businesses in general and their workplaces have come so far in recent times, particularly the last decade, I would say. And as younger generations influence and traditional practices force change. And that can be anything from flexible working to just updating policies to be more inclusive. It could be anything. As I mentioned, an example of that is flex working, which many businesses have adopted, ANZ included. And I cast my mind back to when I first started at ANZ, which was about 2 years ago. And when I walked into the building, it struck me how many pregnant ladies there were. And you know what they say, a healthy environment enables that. So I think clearly people are happy here. Otherwise, this wouldn't be happening. I wouldn't be seeing this to the scale that I was. So that was definitely one thing that I really noticed, which filled me with joy. And I think ANZ specifically also has hired some really fantastic people in critical and key roles. And when you hire the right people in the right roles who can drive change, it allows the organisation to become future fit. And these people also hire the right people. So if you have the wrong people in hiring roles, you have a number of the wrong people also coming in. So I think getting that critically right, and I see that at ANZ, has been fundamental in shifting from banking as it's always been to where banking is moving and where it needs to go in future. So, you know, I think that's been an eye-opener for me as well. It's definitely something that I've noticed. I also think another thing is having a great leader. So our CEO, Shane Elliott, fantastic. Not only does he come with such a grand level of experience in banking globally, but he's also a leader with really high EQ. And this is what the people appreciate. He's also on record as saying that he really hopes that when employees leave ANZ eventually, that they can say at some point in their future career that they learnt that thing while they were at ANZ. How many CEOs would have that outlook? How many would actually say that? So that's really fantastic. And I think something else is there is a number of really fantastic initiatives at ANZ in progress, some of which are under non-disclosure agreements, so I can't talk about,
Right.
But one that I can is one that I'm leading, which is our brand and design system, which is also globally known, or more broadly known as a global experience language, or a GEL. And at scale, this stuff just simply hasn't been done before. And there's only very few organisations globally who have done this successfully. And the BBC gel is one that would come to mind. ANZ is one organisation that is doing this really well. And although we're in our infancy, we have launched version 1, which is a beta version of our system. And it's extremely exciting for the community. It's a really hard and complex initiative in a matrixed environment at scale, but it is extremely rewarding, and it's really useful for people who use it day in, day out. And even more remarkably, it's an initiative that's been, so the content of it has been created by the crowd, and it's for the crowd, and it's been done on virtually no budget, which is, you know, seriously, on the smell of an oily rag, this thing has come to life. And this is probably where my earlier upbringing around growing up with no money comes into play. It's magic can happen if you have the right people with the right vision and the ability to execute. When you get that magic pot together, magic happens. And it's initiatives like that that are happening at ANZ, and more of this stuff is getting rolled out, which makes it really exciting.
Very cool. Like, you touched on a few things there. I could talk about this forever, but does it, like, leadership as one, I'd say I've seen a massive change in a lot of the successful organizations, from leadership being very dictatorship to being people with high EQ, people that are there to support, help and guide and lead an organization forward. And I think that's one of my favorite changes I've seen in organizations. And it's just meant people going to work are just genuinely happier. They're not scared about what their boss is thinking, because their boss talks to them and communicates properly. And I think that's a really exciting change that's happened. And I think all the negatives that come off the back of COVID, I think we'll probably see some really exciting changes that come out of how leaders are now looking out for the mental well-being of their employees, not just their performance, which is another very interesting
Absolutely.
thing.
Yeah, and it's absolutely something that prospective employees look for in an organisation. It's around what other types of support is this organisation going to offer me beyond the day-to-day of the role and beyond remuneration. What are all the other benefits that come with that? What's the culture look like, etc. And you know, that style of leadership from the top and how that filters down, and the approach that the organisation takes is absolutely critical. And a lot of people place really high priority on that when they are job searching, really.
I agree.
Yeah.
So I think companies used to promote things like pool tables, ping pong tables and beer fridges, and now they're promoting how they treat their staff, emotional intelligence. It's such a shift in mind. It's really good. There's only positives that come out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're spot on with that. I'm not sure what it says about the ping pong table and all of that, but look, I think there's always place for a ping pong table in an organisation. But yeah, definitely. For me personally, it's probably not as high up as how does the company, with what ethos does the company operate? That is more important to me than a ping pong table. But I will happily take that as a bonus.
Yeah, I just don't think it's a selling point anymore. It's something that you turn up and you're seeing, oh, that's cool. I might use that once every year or so, but it's not really a selling point.
Yeah.
What trends do you see emerging in the design space specifically? Like, I think design from an outside perspective has come an incredible long way over the last couple of years in terms of where a business values design. What do you see as one of the main emerging trends?
I think if I think about this operationally, I think for agencies that are involved with design, I think it's designing beyond the pixel and designing for delivery and the day-to-day that businesses are faced with. So I guess traditionally being part of a piece of work on agency side, you know, you come in, you do the work, you hand it over, and hopefully it gets implemented. And I've been around too long enough to know that in many cases that work doesn't get implemented for a variety of reasons. And I think the agencies that can nail that real end-to-end service and delivery in a BAU type environment are the ones that are going to be most successful from a design and a business perspective. And for businesses, client side, I think it's being open to testing and learning what design thinking means and what it can do within more than just creative spaces. So seeing designers infiltrate non-design teams is really humbling for me to see, particularly when one person turns into a whole team of designers. It means design, something's going right with design. Is it the technical remit? Is it the leader? Are they able to influence? Is it the end product or the result? Is it the metrics? Is it a combination of that? I think that's spectacular. And as for products and services, someone or something I think really needs to solve for a couple of really annoying experiences. I think number one, consumers needing 1 million passwords for everything in this day and age in 2021. A single sign-on hasn't fixed that, and it doesn't solve the macro issue either. So whatever that solution looks like to avoid all these passwords and usernames for everything, that would be a great opportunity to be able to fix that, and a great trend I think that could emerge. And the other one is, we have a plethora of places to go for information at present. So imagine if we could open one dashboard with all the information that we want on a day-to-day basis and all these notifications in one spot, rather than having to check all these things everywhere. A very timely conversation is the whole Facebook and news media thing in Australia. Whether you're for or against that, having the information in one spot is handy. It's convenient. So there's some of the trends that people are talking about. I don't think we've found solutions. I don't even think we're close to solutions. But where there's some momentum, there's absolutely opportunity, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in those spaces, and hopefully solutions on that in the not too distant future.
Oh, I hope someone can solve the password issue. Having to remember 4,000 different passwords and then change them every couple of weeks, not ideal.
No. And I think there's also probably another trend as well around wearable technology. I think, we've been in the wearable technology space for, let's just say, a decade now. It's infiltrated our life as well in many ways. But I'm also seeing a number of people opting out of wearable technology just to be able to go all natural when they go on their walk or their run or whatever it might be. They don't want to wear the device. They don't want to be connected. They don't want to have the phone in their pocket or whatever's going on. There is a bit of I guess, some momentum happening there. I don't know whether it will continue, or maybe it's time for the next wearable to come out, or maybe it's not a wearable at all. Maybe it's another IoT piece that can make the wearable redundant. Don't know what that looks like, but yeah, it's definitely interesting.
I'm always excited by technology. I love watching what comes out and people think of. I'm not that creative, but I have an Oura ring which tells me how well I sleep, and I love it. It's just so many cool things that I wouldn't have thought I would like, but I do.
Yeah, and how are you sleeping, Joe? You sleeping well?
Last night was pretty good. It was 84%, so
that's not too bad.
Close to excellent. So
yeah, good on you.
I'd be still in bed if I didn't sleep well.
Yeah, your ring would tell you. Yeah,
exactly. Go back to bed, Joe. This last question is probably more for me. I had a look at your recent master's project in the Futures of Design Leadership, and the things that you found from the group of people that you interviewed. What was something that came out of that was either really exciting or really alarming? So either or from the findings.
Oh, look, there's many interesting things that came out of that research. Some of it which was not news to me, and then other things that really did surprise me. One of the things that surprised me was that so design leaders had the option to review and rate themselves and what they believe to be important, as well as other designers and people from the non-design field. So it was a real 360 view. And one of the things that surprised me was that design leaders are really hard on themselves. So they think they need to have more financial and business literacy than what everyone else seems to think that design leaders need. So There's a bit of a disconnect there, which is interesting. So we can all relax a little bit more. We need to sort of bask in our own space and what we're good at, but at the same time, have an appreciation and some level of understanding when it comes to business acumen and financial literacy is really important. Whether you work in financial services or any other sector, understanding how businesses work and what their goals are is critical. Whether or not you specialize or not is beside the point, but just having an appreciation for that is key. So that really surprised me, how hard design leaders were on themselves. And another one that really surprised me was that so the people that were in that other category, so in the non-design category, really felt that designers and design leaders really lack an ability to influence. So this means not just working on communication, but how we show up, both physically and verbally, how we carry ourselves, as well as how are we storytelling, how are we coming across? Are we coming across knowledgeable and interesting? Have we linked our design problem or idea to a customer, client, or problem? And then also, have we linked it into a business problem or metric? Because how is the rest of the organisation going to be able to understand what we're talking about and the value of what we think needs to be done and what we believe to be true in the design space? How is that going to help the business bottom line? So that was really surprising. And we need to be able to hand it to decision makers on a bit of a silver platter, including how we present ourselves, how we deliver business results. And it's not okay to just be inspiring. You need to be able to deliver. And you need to come as a bit of a package or partner up with someone who you can package with. So be the salt and pepper. So if you are really good at this one thing, being inspirational and all the rest of it, who's going to deliver that for you? You know, who's going to be able to influence? Who's going to be able to do that other stuff? And, you know, it's really hard to find someone who can do it all, as the research has shown. But if you can really closely partner with someone or a group of people who can cross off all those elements, then, you know, we have a really good and promising future ahead of us. And, you know, designers are really have the good fortune that we can often problem solve our way out of things, which not all functions can do. So we're really fortunate like that. Call it the right brain function, but creatives are really, really good at it. So, you know, there shouldn't be a problem that we can't solve, really.
I think in your research you mentioned like the business acumen was one of the points that I put down. But if you could get those couple of things you've just mentioned correct, or partner with the right person that can help you get to that point, do you think that would give design that seat at the CEO's table to be making more business-led decisions?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because, you know, in many cases, you know, designers think differently. It's part of the DNA, you know, often creative, high empathy, etc. Think differently, which is why a lot of businesses get involved with design, because they don't want to do things the way that they've always done them. So designers are brought, design thinking is brought in to challenge the norm. So that's great. And working at an individual level, if you can get those ideas going and on paper, you need to be able to sell those ideas as well, but not just sell them. You need to be able to see them through. And this is where that sort of end-to-end life cycle really plays a critical part, because it's one thing to sell a dream or sell a vision, but if you can't implement it and then work out the plan how, and I'm not saying the design leader needs to be responsible for all of that. I do think in part they need to be, and they need to be held to account. But it might mean that as a design leader, I partner with someone who is meticulous with delivering projects or initiatives, or is meticulous with their commercial acumen, or is meticulous with creating business cases. So I don't need to necessarily be the subject matter expert in all of those fields, because we're all of a sudden talking about 4 careers. But partnering with people who are really tight on that is critical, because that creates the highest chance of success with executing on a vision and being able to measure success and hitting the mark when it comes to solving a customer problem or opportunity, and being able to report on that and then iterate. And then the life cycle of that particular initiative continues with its momentum, with its funding, etc. And then you can end up, planning out your phase 2 or your phase 3 or your phase 4. So yeah, that partnership is absolutely critical. Otherwise, we have these strategies and ideas and visions that remain a chart on a wall or on a mirror or a mural board somewhere, and they never see the light of day beyond being on a canvas. And that's a sad state that we're sometimes faced with. So anything we can do to solve that, I'm all for it.
Yeah, that's so good. Some really good insights there. Thank you so much for opening up and sharing a bit more about both yourself, design, and ANZ. Like it's really good to get an understanding of where they're at and why they're such a good place, but where things, I guess, click together as an organisation. So thanks so much for joining me today, Michelle. It was fantastic. For anyone that is interested in connecting with you, what's the best way? Via LinkedIn or reaching out?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. Feel free to get in contact with me. Always happy to have a chat.
Fantastic. And mate, once again, thank you so much. That was a really, really good chat, Michelle. So
no worries.
I'll leave it there. But thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much, Joe. Enjoy the rest of your day.
No worries. Thanks, Michelle. See you later.